Who are these people? Who are you?
Don't say a word. I'll handle this.
The night Amara found out who he really was, she was standing in her own kitchen holding a knife. Not as a weapon, but because her hands needed something solid to grip. His father's men were outside. 6 of them. Black suits, earpieces, faces carved from stone. Sung-jin, the man she had been feeding soup to, laughing with at midnight, falling for slowly and then all at once, was standing between her and the door like a wall she hadn't known she needed. He turned to look at her. And in his eyes was something she had never seen there before. Not hunger. Not warmth. Power. Raw, inherited, terrifying power. Amara, he said quietly. Don't say a word. I'll handle this. She almost laughed. Handle it. Like this was something that could be handled. Like her diner wasn't surrounded. Like her heart wasn't cracking open down the middle. She had let a hungry boy into her restaurant 8 weeks ago. She had no idea she was letting in a storm. Welcome to Seoul and Afro Storytime. On today's episode you'd get a dose of betrayal, power, romance, love, unexpected encounters and beautiful beginning. If this is your first time here, make sure to like, subscribe, click the notification icon to get a reminder when new amazing stories drop, and send this story to friends and family who you think would love to watch it. And also tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I'd really love to know. Now let's dive back into this amazing story. Amara Boateng did not come to Seoul to fall in love. She came to survive. She left Kumasi at 26 with one checked bag, a laminated copy of her mother's recipes, and a stubbornness that her aunties called a flaw and she called a survival tool. 3 years later she owned Osei Kitchen, a small Afro-fusion diner tucked inside the busy, breathing belly of Itaewon. It was not glamorous. The ceiling had a water stain shaped like a mango. The industrial fridge made a sound every Thursday that no engineer had ever been able to explain. But the food was extraordinary, and word had spread the way good food always does, quietly, hungrily, and without advertising. Amara ran it alone. She hired part-time help on weekends, but the soul of the place was entirely hers. She was there at 6 every morning and rarely left before midnight. She had no boyfriend, no situationship, no entanglements. She had a business, a savings goal, and a mother back home who called every Sunday expecting good news. She was fine. She told herself this often enough that most days she believed it. The night Sung-jin walked in, it was raining the way Seoul sometimes rains in October. Like the sky had been holding something in for too long and finally gave up trying. Amara was wiping down the counter. The last customer had left 20 minutes ago. She was technically closed. The door opened anyway. He was tall. That was the first thing she noticed. Then she noticed the split lip. Then the soaked white shirt clinging to his shoulders. Then his eyes, dark, still, and carrying the particular exhaustion of someone who hadn't slept in days, not because they were busy but because something was eating them from the inside. He looked at her like he expected to be turned away. "We're closed," she said. He nodded. Didn't move. She looked at him for another second. Looked at the rain behind him. Looked at the way he was standing. Proud but barely. Like a man performing strength because falling apart in a stranger's doorway wasn't something he would allow himself. She sighed so hard it moved her shoulders. "Sit down." His name came out in pieces. Sung-jin. 22. He said he lived nearby, which she didn't believe. He said he was fine, which was obviously a lie. She put jollof rice in front of him and watched him eat with the focused, silent intensity of someone who hadn't had a real meal in longer than he was admitting. "You cook this yourself?" he asked. "No, I hired a ghost," she said. He looked up. And for the first time, something almost like a smile moved across his face. It was small. Barely there. But it changed his entire face, and Amara felt something stir in her chest that she immediately decided to ignore. He helped her stack the chairs before he left. She didn't ask him to. He just did it, quietly and efficiently, like he was accustomed to making himself useful in spaces where he hadn't been invited. At the door he paused. "Thank you," he said. "Seriously. Come back when we're actually open," she said. "I'll charge you full price." He came back the next day. And the day after that. By the 3rd week he was showing up early enough to carry the delivery crates from the pavement to the kitchen. By the 4th he knew where everything went without being told. He learned the Twi word for be careful, because Amara said it every time he handled her grandmother's ceramic bowls. He learned that she took her coffee with no sugar because she said life was already too complicated without adding sweetness that didn't last. She learned that he was quiet in the particular way that people are quiet when they're used to rooms going silent when they speak. She learned that he had a mind that moved fast and hands that worked faster. She learned that when he laughed, really laughed, it was sudden and unguarded, and it made her feel like she'd won something. She told herself it was mentorship. She told herself it was kindness. She was lying to herself. But the lie was so comfortable she wore it like a coat. Until the night everything came apart. It started with a phone call he didn't want her to see. It was a Wednesday. Quiet afternoon. The lunch rush had settled and Amara was in the kitchen reducing a pepper sauce that needed another 20 minutes. Sung-jin was at the front, restocking the drink fridge, humming something low under his breath the way he did when he thought no one was listening. Then his phone rang. She didn't think anything of it at first. Phones ring. People answer. But what caught her attention was the silence that followed. The humming stopped. The restocking stopped. Everything stopped. She leaned slightly to look through the kitchen pass-through window. Sung-jin was standing completely still. Phone pressed to his ear. His free hand had curled into a fist at his side so slowly and so tightly that the knuckles had gone white. His jaw was set. His eyes were looking at nothing. That specific kind of nothing that means a person is actually looking inward at something terrible. He said 3 words in Korean. Short-clipped. Final. Then he hung up. He stood there for 4 full seconds. Then he straightened, rolled his shoulders back and went back to restocking the fridge like nothing had happened. Amara said nothing. But she watched him for the rest of that afternoon and noticed things she hadn't let herself notice before. The way he sat with his back always to the wall. The way he scanned a room when he entered it before he did anything else. The way certain black cars that crawled slowly down their street made his whole body go quiet in a way that had nothing to do with calm. She noticed. And she filed it somewhere she wasn't ready to open. That evening, when the diner was empty, she handed him a bowl of her mother's groundnut soup. The one she only made when something needed to be said without words, and sat across from him at the corner table. "Who are you?" she asked. Not aggressively. Just honestly. He looked at the soup. Then at her. "You know who I am." "I know your name," she said. "I know you eat like someone who hasn't been taken care of properly. I know you work like someone who was raised to earn his place in every room." She paused. "I don't know who's calling you and making you look like that." Something moved through his eyes. There and gone. "It's complicated," he said. "I run a business by myself in a foreign country," Amara said. "I understand complicated." He was quiet for a long moment. Then quietly, so quietly she almost missed it, he said, "My father wants me back." "Back from where?" "From here." He looked around the diner. At the warm lights. At the chalkboard menu in her handwriting. At the ceramic bowls. At her. "From this." Amara felt the weight of that land somewhere in her chest and stay there. "And what do you want?" she asked. He looked at her for so long and so directly that she felt her breath go shallow. "I think you know what I want," he said. The air between them changed. It had been changing for weeks, slow and undeniable like the tide, but this was the first time neither of them pretended not to feel it. She should have looked away. He didn't. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his, and his touch was gentle in a way that surprised her because nothing about the rest of him suggested gentleness. "Sung-jin," she started. "Don't," he said softly. "Don't tell me it's complicated. I already know it's complicated. I'm asking you what you want. Not what's smart. Not what's safe. What do you want, Amara?" She looked at his hand over hers. She thought about all the reasons this was a bad idea. The age gap was manageable, but the mystery around him was not. She knew nothing real about his life outside these 4 walls. And the instinct she had learned to trust was sending up quiet smoke signals she kept choosing to ignore. Then she turned her hand over. And held his back. Neither of them said anything for a while. They didn't need to. Now here's what nobody tells you about falling for someone wrapped in secrets. It doesn't happen in a dramatic moment. It happens in the small ones. It happens when he learns to make your coffee exactly how you like it without being asked. It happens when he notices you're tired before you say so and dims the lights without explanation. It happens when he looks at you across a busy dining room and for one unguarded second his face does something so open and so unprotected that your heart physically aches. That was the month Amara stopped lying to herself. She was falling. Completely. Recklessly. And with the full terrifying awareness that she didn't know who she was falling toward. Because Sung-jin was warm and attentive and funny in that dry, understated way that sneaks up on you. But he was also sealed off. There were rooms inside him she had never been invited into. Questions he answered with other questions. And that phone call on Wednesday had not been the last one. There were more. Always brief. Always in Korean, too fast and too low for even her improving language skills to follow. Always followed by that same stillness. That same jaw. That same deliberate return to normal. Something was coming. Amara could feel it the way you feel weather before it arrives. She just didn't know how bad the storm would be. Before we go any further, tell me honestly, would you have held his hand back? Or would you have pulled away? Drop your answer in the comments right now because I genuinely want to know. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because what happens next in this story will have you wanting to rewatch this from the beginning. Don't miss it. Now let's keep going. The first time she saw the car, she didn't think anything of it. A black Mercedes. Tinted windows. Parked across the street from Osei Kitchen at 9 in the morning on a Friday. By the time the lunch rush ended, it was gone. She filed it under coincidence and moved on. The second time it was a different car. Same tinted windows. Same deliberate stillness. Same spot. The third time she counted 2 cars. She didn't tell Sung-jin. She didn't know why. Maybe because she didn't want to frighten him, or maybe because some quiet part of her already suspected that telling him would confirm something she wasn't ready to hear. So she watched. She noted. And she kept cooking, kept laughing, kept letting him fill up the warm corners of her daily life in ways she hadn't realized were empty until he arrived. What she didn't know was that Sung-jin had already seen the cars. He had seen them before she did. The night it finally cracked open started like every good night at Osei Kitchen. The diner was full. There was music, Afrobeats blending into soft Korean indie the way only Amara could mix them without it feeling strange. The pepper soup was getting compliments from a table of Korean university students who had never had it before and were now looking personally betrayed that they'd existed this long without it. Sung-jin was moving through the space with the easy confidence he'd developed over weeks, taking orders, cracking jokes, translating the menu for new customers with a warmth that made people feel seen. He had become part of the texture of this place. Part of its heartbeat. Amara watched him from behind the counter and felt something so full and so frightening move through her chest that she had to look away. Then the door opened. Not with a bang. That's not how real danger announces itself. It opened quietly. Politely even. And the man who walked in was well-dressed, silver-haired, and wearing the particular expression of someone who owns every room they enter simply by deciding to. He looked around the diner once. Then his eyes landed on Sung-jin and stayed there. Sung-jin went completely still. It lasted only a second, that stillness, before he recovered. But Amara had been watching him long enough to catch it. That was not the stillness of surprise. That was the stillness of dread. The silver-haired man sat at the counter. He looked at Amara with dark, assessing eyes and smiled the kind of smile that had nothing warm in it. "You must be the woman who's been keeping my son fed," he said. In perfect English. Smooth as polished stone. The diner noise continued around them. No one else heard. Amara felt the words land in her stomach like cold water. His son. She kept her face neutral by sheer force of will. Years of navigating difficult customers, difficult landlords, difficult men who assumed her business was a hobby. All of it had given her a face she could lock down when necessary. She used it now. "Everyone who comes through that door gets fed," she said evenly. "That's what a restaurant is." The man's smile widened slightly. He looked at her the way you look at something unexpectedly interesting. "I like you," he said simply. Then he turned to Sung-jin and switched to Korean, fast, low, deliberate. Sung-jin responded. Equally low. His voice had changed entirely. The warmth was gone. In its place was something older and harder, like a layer of him she had never been shown had just surfaced. The exchange lasted less than a minute. Then the silver-haired man stood, straightened his jacket, looked at Amara one final time and said, "Lovely place. I hope it stays that way." And he left. The diner kept moving. Music kept playing. The university students were now asking if they could order a second round of pepper soup. Amara walked into the kitchen. Fully. Deliberately. Because she needed 4 walls around her before she let her face do what it was trying to do. Sung-jin followed her in 30 seconds later. He closed the kitchen door behind him. Amara. Who is he? She said. Her voice was quiet. That was the dangerous register. She knew it. He seemed to sense it too. He's my father. I understood that part. She turned around to face him. Who is he? Sung-jin looked at her for a long moment. And in that moment something shifted in his face. A slow, reluctant lowering of something he'd been holding up for a very long time. Like a man finally setting down something heavy because he simply couldn't carry it any further. His name is Kwon De-young, he said quietly. And he runs everything in this city that isn't supposed to exist. The kitchen was very loud then. The fridge. The extractor fan. Her own heartbeat. Everything, she repeated. Illegal imports. Private security networks. Politicians who owe him favors they can never fully repay. He paused. He is not a man people say no to. I've spent 4 months trying to disappear from that world. Trying to be something different. Someone different. His jaw tensed. He found me. He always finds me. Amara stared at him. And the cars outside? Something crossed his face that looked very much like shame. His people. Watching me. And he stopped. And watching me, she finished. He didn't deny it. She turned back to her stove. Braced both hands against the counter. Amara. I'm sorry. I should have told you. You should have told me everything, she said. From the beginning. I know. But you didn't. I know. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, and this was the thing that would stay with her, the thing she would turn over in her mind for weeks afterward. She didn't ask him to leave. He should have. Every sensible part of her was filing the paperwork to tell him to go. But her hands were still on the counter. And his hand came to rest on her shoulder, careful, warm, asking nothing, and she let it stay there. That was the moment she crossed the line she'd been standing at the edge of for weeks. He crossed it fully. Eyes open. Heart hammering. And the storm she'd been sensing was no longer coming. It had arrived. Now I need you to stop right here. Because I have to ask you something. When he told her the truth too late but still, would you have let him stay? Or would the secret have been too much to forgive? Tell me in the comments. And also, drop the city you're watching from because this community is growing and I want to see exactly where our family is spread across the world. Subscribe if you haven't. Because what happens next will break you open in the best possible way. Let's keep going. 3 days passed after that night. 3 days of something unspoken sitting between them like a third person in every room. Sung-jin still came. He still let him in. But the easy warmth they had built so carefully over weeks had a crack running through it now. Visible only to them but real. The way he looked at her had changed too. There was something raw in it now. Unguarded in a way that almost hurt to look at directly. On the third night after closing he asked her to walk with him. Seoul at midnight in late October is its own kind of beautiful. The Han River carrying city lights on its surface like scattered jewels. The streets thinning out until the city felt almost intimate. They walked along the waterfront without destination, hands close but not touching. The silence between them the kind that needed to be broken carefully or not at all. He spoke first. I left home 14 months ago, he said. Not ran away, but deliberately. With a bag and a decision. He paused. My father built everything he has on fear. And I watched my entire childhood what fear does to people who love each other. What it does to a family. He stopped walking. Looked at the water. I didn't want that life. I refused it. And refusing my father is not something people do safely. Yet here you are, Amara said quietly. Still alive. Because I'm his only son, he said. He won't touch me. But everyone around me. He stopped himself. She heard what he didn't finish. Everyone around you is exposed, she said. He turned to look at her then. Fully. And what was on his face was not pity or manipulation. It was the particular anguish of someone who has brought something they love into proximity with something dangerous and cannot undo it. I should have left the night you first fed me, he said. I knew it. I sat at that table and I thought, get up, Sung-jin. Don't do this to her. His voice dropped. I couldn't make myself go. Amara looked at him for a long time. The wind off the river moved through her braids. In the far distance, Seoul glittered indifferently. Why? She asked. Not accusingly. She genuinely wanted to hear him say it. He took a step toward her. Close enough that she had to tilt her chin up slightly to hold his gaze. His hand came up slowly, deliberately, and rested against her jaw. Thumb brushing her cheekbone with a tenderness so concentrated it almost undid her entirely. Because you were the first person in years who looked at me and saw nothing useful, he said softly. No leverage. No access. No strategy. He exhaled. You just fed me. And it wrecked me completely. Amara felt her chest crack open along a seam she hadn't known was there. Sung-jin. I know what I am, he said. I know what my name carries. I know what following me costs people. I have spent 14 months trying to be something my name isn't. His thumb traced her jaw. But I look at you and I stop being able to think about any of that. She reached up and covered his hand with hers. Not to remove it. To hold it there. You should have told me, she whispered. Yes. You let me walk into this without the full picture. Yes. His voice was rough with it. And I will spend whatever time you give me making that right. But Amara. He leaned his forehead down to hers. Their breath mingled in the cold air. Tell me there's still time. Tell me I haven't already broken this. She should have been stronger. Every practical, self-preserving part of her was raising its hand trying to speak. She had a business. A reputation. A life she had built with her bare hands from nothing. This man came with shadows that could swallow all of it. She knew all of that. And then she kissed him. It wasn't tentative. It wasn't the kind of kiss that asks a question. It was the kind that makes a decision. Full and certain and terrifying in its clarity. His arms came around her immediately, pulling her in with a desperation that told her everything she needed to know about how long he'd been holding that back. She felt his exhale against her mouth like relief. Like a man who had been underwater finally breaking the surface. When they separated, she pressed her palm flat against his chest. His heart was hammering. She found that extraordinarily comforting. I'm not fragile, she said, looking up at him steadily. Don't treat me like I need protecting. If this is real, whatever this is, we do it with full honesty. No more half-truths. No more things I should know that you decide to manage on my behalf. He looked at her like she had said something that rearranged him internally. Full honesty, he repeated. Starting now. He was quiet. Then, my father didn't just come to the diner to see me. His jaw tightened. He came to assess you. To decide whether you're a complication or a liability. The cold off the river felt sharper suddenly. And what did he decide? Sung-jin's expression darkened in a way that answered the question before his words did. He's given me 1 week, he said. To end this. Walk away from you and come home voluntarily. Or, he stopped. Or what? She pressed. He looked at her. And what moved through his eyes was not fear for himself. It was something far more dangerous. It was fear for her. Sung-jin. Her voice was firm. Or what? Or he removes the complication himself. The river kept moving. Seoul kept glittering. And Amara stood in the middle of it all, holding the hand of a man whose father had just quietly, politely threatened her life, and felt something rise in her chest that wasn't fear. It was fury. Clean, focused, absolute. She had not crossed an ocean and built something from nothing to be called a complication by any man. Not even the most feared one in Korea. Then, she said quietly, we have 1 week. She spent the first day of that week doing something Sung-jin did not expect. She cooked. Not out of fear. Not as distraction. She cooked with the specific focused intensity of a woman who had decided something and was working out the details. Jollof rice with the heat turned up. Groundnut soup at full depth. Every dish her mother had taught her that meant, I am still here. I am still standing. Come and see me. Sung-jin watched her from across the kitchen with an expression she was beginning to understand. It was the look he got when she did something that surprised him. When she refused to be what the situation seemed to be asking of her. You're not scared, he said. Not a question. I didn't say that, she replied without turning around. I'm terrified. I'm just not letting it drive. He was quiet for a moment. Most people when my father gives them a week. I'm not most people, she said simply. And you already know that. On the 3rd day, Sung-jin disappeared for 6 hours without explanation. Amara held it together through the lunch and dinner service. She smiled at customers and translated her panic into perfect plating, and not a single dish left her kitchen that wasn't extraordinary. But by 9 o'clock, when the last table cleared and he still wasn't back, she sat down on the kitchen floor with her back against the fridge and let herself feel all of it. The fear. The fury. The absurd, inconvenient, consuming feeling she had for a man she had known for less than 3 months, who had arrived soaking wet with a split lip and quietly rearranged every carefully organized corner of her life. The door opened at 9:47. He walked in looking like he'd had a war inside a boardroom. Jacket gone. Shirt collar open. Something in his eyes that was different, harder and softer at the same time in a way she couldn't immediately name. He saw her on the floor and stopped. Then he crossed the kitchen, slid down the fridge beside her, and sat there with their shoulders touching without saying a single word. She let the silence sit for a full minute. "Where were you?" she finally asked. "With my father." She turned to look at him. "I told him I wasn't coming back," Sung-jin said. His voice was completely steady. "I told him I was done. That the life he built is not the life I want. That I would not be inheriting his empire or his methods or his reputation." He paused. "And I told him that the woman he called a complication is the clearest thing that has happened to me in years. And that he would not touch her." Amara stared at him. "You said that?" To his face. To his face. "Sung-jin," she exhaled. "What did he say?" Something shifted in his expression. "He laughed," he said quietly. And then he stopped laughing. And then he said. He paused, and she watched him decide how to carry the next words carefully. He said no son of his would throw away everything for a woman who would eventually leave anyway. The kitchen was very quiet. "And what did you say to that?" Amara asked. Sung-jin turned to look at her fully. In the low kitchen light, with the city humming outside and the ceramic bowls on the shelf and the whole small sacred world of Osei kitchen around them, he looked at her like she was the only fixed point in a map that kept shifting. "I said then I'll spend whatever time I have making sure she doesn't want to." Something broke open in Amara's chest. Quietly. Irreversibly. She reached over and took his face in both her hands, the way you hold something you've decided to keep, and kissed him slowly. Thoroughly. With the full weight of everything the last 3 months had built between them. He kissed her back with his whole self, hands in her hair, forehead pressed to hers afterward like he was trying to memorize the exact coordinates of this moment. "What happens now?" she whispered against his mouth. "I don't know," he admitted. "My father is not a man who accepts no gracefully. There will be consequences. I won't pretend otherwise. But I choose this." He pulled back just enough to look at her. "I choose you. Specifically. Deliberately. With full knowledge of what it costs." His thumb traced her lower lip. "If you'll let me." She looked at him for a long moment. Thought about the water stain on the ceiling shaped like a mango. The fridge that made its Thursday sound. The ceramic bowls from her grandmother. The life she had built here, fragile and sturdy in equal measure. Then she thought about him carrying crates in the rain. Learning tree words. Sitting beside her on the kitchen floor at 9:47 at night because the floor was where she was. "You're going to have to learn how to make jollof rice," she said. He blinked. Then that laugh came, sudden, unguarded, completely real. "That's your condition?" "It's a starting point," she said. "We negotiate from there." He pulled her in and held her the way people hold things they thought they'd lost, with both arms and without embarrassment. She let herself be held. Fully. Without shrinking or qualifying or managing the feeling down to something more reasonable. Outside, Seoul kept moving. Somewhere across the city, a powerful man was sitting with the word no still ringing in a room he controlled entirely. That was not finished. They both knew it. The road ahead had shadows in it that neither of them could fully see yet. But in this kitchen, in this moment, something real had been chosen. And chosen things, the ones that cost something, have a way of lasting. Amara came to Seoul to survive. She built something extraordinary from nothing, the way women like her always do. Quietly, completely, without asking permission. She didn't plan for Sung-jin. She didn't plan to have her whole world complicated and expanded and cracked open by a hungry boy with a dangerous last name. But the heart is not a business plan. It doesn't ask whether the timing is right or the risk is reasonable. It simply recognizes what it needs and moves toward it. And sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is let something real in, even when real comes wrapped in storm. Now before you go, I need to ask you 3 things and I want honest answers in the comments. Was Amara right to stay? Or did she let love make her reckless in a way that will cost her everything later? And what about Sung-jin? Do you think a man raised inside that kind of darkness can ever fully walk away from it? Or does it always find its way back? And finally, if someone looked at you the way he looked at her and said I choose you specifically, deliberately, with full knowledge of what it costs, would that be enough for you? Drop your answers below. I read every single comment and I genuinely want to know what you think. If this story moved you even a little, share it. Send it to someone who loves a good love story. And if you are not subscribed yet, then you are actively choosing to miss out, because the next story coming to this channel is going to hit even harder than this one. Click subscribe. Hit the notification bell. And come back. This has been Seoul and Afro Storytime. Same heart. Same fire. Next time.